And welcome back. Now, after 3 days of intense discussions, panel sessions, and roundtables, the 30th Nigerian Economic Summit has officially come to a close last week, themed Collaborative Action for Growth, Competitiveness, and Stability. This year's summit gathered experts from both public and private sector to deliberate on the challenges plaguing Nigeria's economy. From reviewing government's reforms to proposing far-reaching solutions, key stakeholders have come forward with ideas aimed at shaping the future of our economy.
That's right. And our business correspondent, Perpetua Fasanmi-Peter, was at the summit and has been closely following the conversations. She joined us now on to talk more about the outcome of the summit. But first, we have a package from her. Let's quickly roll out the package.
The session featured Nigeria's Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, the country director of the World Bank, among other high-level panelists. The session, themed Fiscal Reforms for a More Secure Future, sought to measure government's current reforms and the impact on the state of the economy. The finance minister maintained that the reforms are working, especially when compared with available macroeconomic indicators.
The macroeconomic reforms are working. If you agree with the World Bank on some other indicators, GDP, the budget deficit, the balance of trade, and so forth, they will tell you they're all positive, they're all going in the right direction. So what we need to do is to sustain.
Questions were asked on the attitude of government officials towards its current reforms and its plea for citizens' change of attitude.
The panelists said yesterday that the government needed to show good faith by leading by example. Is the government listening, and which areas should Nigerians expect to start seeing plugging of holes and tightening of belts so that we can see less wastage and possibly begin to see ministers looking very lean as a result of them tightening their belts? Thank you.
It is not reform without end. It is not belt tightening without end. So what the government is now pivoting to what will grow the economy, create jobs, reduce poverty, which is the president's overall aim and objective.
Other panelists also sought to know measures being put in place to improve the nation's spending culture in a bid to alleviate the hardship being faced by citizens.
So once you collect more revenue, the other part of the equation is how do you spend it better? And how do you spend it to address those needs of the population? And I think that's why also it's quite important to focus on the expenditure side.
In terms of the social programs, I think it is the NEL Fund, the Nigerian Education Loan Fund. They publish exactly what they are doing. And I think same with the Consumer Credit Corps. And for the Social Investment Program direct transfers, we are preparing the kind of dashboard that would tell people exactly what has been given to whom and when.
The minister further expressed confidence that citizens will soon begin to feel the effect of government's reforms. In Abuja for News Central, I am Perpetua Fasanmi-Peter.
And we've seen from that report, the summit covered a range of critical issues, including Nigeria's fiscal and monetary policies, structural reforms, and their impact on growth. But what does this mean for the Nigerian economy moving forward? And how will these proposals affect the everyday Nigerians? And so joining us to discuss this and more is News Central's Perpetua Fasanmi-Peters. Welcome. Hello, darling. How are you doing?
Where do we welcome you back from Addis Ababa or Abuja?
Okay, so Abuja.
Yeah, Abuja. Yeah, there we go.
On and about for 2 weeks now.
Yeah, for 2 weeks. You can see that
Globe
again.
trotting.
No, working.
I've got so many questions for you about Ethiopia, but I'll ask after.
Mazino, it's just been
that's fine.
bombarding you. But hey, let's talk about the summit. The theme was of this year was collaborative action for growth and competitive stability. What were the key takeaways from the discussions around this, and how I would ask, how visible are these recommendations in the current economic climate that we find ourselves?
Well, that's quite interesting. Thank you for that question. So talking about the theme, I think the theme is actually very apt, looking at what's happening right now in Nigeria, because it would seem that there is a disconnect between the government and the people, because the government keeps telling us, these monetary reforms, these reforms we are doing, whether it is the twin reforms, which is subsidy removal and
floating the naira,
exactly.
devaluation of the naira.
When we look at all of those things, to a very large extent, yes, I understand that a lot of persons have said, it was too late. Like, when we did that, it was already too late. I understand that. But what did not happen was that the government didn't put in enough measure. The government did these two things within a month.
Yes.
And that, of course, wasn't good enough for the people. And
was it a month or simultaneously?
Not necessarily simultaneously. May 29th and then June 14th.
Right.
Mm-hmm. June 14th was when the whole floating of the naira happened.
Yeah.
June 14th,
within 30
2023.
days anyway.
Right. But with that mention, that very day, we saw the chaos and all the signs of what was to come
so
that very week.
what happened was that the government didn't put measures in place, or the government didn't envisage the impact it then had on the people. I think that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, there is that talk about, okay, yes, we're doing so much, revenue has improved, maybe foreign reserve has improved, just like he was saying. Mm-hmm. We understand that these things have improved, but these things are improving at the expense of businesses,
right,
at the expense of Nigerians. You're taking this monies away from Nigerians, you're putting it into the government's purse. Now, what is the government doing with it? From that report, you could see that, to a very large extent, World Bank was also saying that, yes, you guys are doing well. Talking about, revenue to GDP growing from 7% to a projection of 10% by 2024. That's 3% projected growth. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, it's not something that happens every time. So, yes, there is that conversation around it has grown. But when you look at that money, at the end of the day, it is curtsy naira devaluation, which means it's not necessarily real money at the end of the day, because that same money cannot give you the same value it gave you 10 months ago, 12 months ago, 13 months ago.
Last month.
Oh, last one. That's another one. So we have that conversation. And then I was happy that we also had this conversation where the private sector were talking about what they were going through. And for them, the naira devaluation happens to be a big deal for them because they have challenges accessing forex. And you need forex to import goods. Nigeria, to a very large extent, even our commodities are sort of primary, and that the primary commodities are influenced by external shocks. They're influenced by, external issues. And some of these commodities, their pricing, they're not local prices. Yeah. They're international prices. Crude oil international, whether you're talking about, any other thing. these are international prices.
Yeah, like even wheat as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we really need to do much more. So for this business people, they're talking about the challenges they are facing, and they are saying that government needs to do more.
Can I pause you there? Okay. You said for these business people, and that was what I really wanted to know. What was the makeup? What's the anatomy of the NESG? Who were present exactly? It's one of two questions. So if you could tell us exactly who were present at the NESG.
All right, so for the NESG, we had private sector, we had non-government organizations, we also had government. But of course, talking about government, we had the vice president who represented the president. We also had the minister of budget and economic planning. We had the minister of finance and coordinating minister of the economy. That's Wale Edo.
So I can see the stakeholders there.
Exactly.
However, now this has been 30 years. This is the 30th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, yes? 30 years, and if you ask the local man on the street, do you know about the NESG? They'd be like, what does that do? That's not the question. The question is, how does everything that was discussed at the NESG translate into implementation? What's going to carry it on now? How is that going to happen? All
right, so let me start by saying that one of the things we also have to know is that some of the recommendations from that particular summit have actually made it to the front burner and have been implemented. Whether you want to talk about whether it's the pension reform or you want to talk about the telecommunications, these were some conversations that actually started from NES, that's the Nigerian Economic Summit, and from there, these things then became, policies that were implemented, which is quite interesting, which is beautiful. However, for this particular one, we're talking about a green book. Usually there is a green book where you have more like a communique that sort of has all the recommendations that were made, and that to be presented to the government. And the good thing is that the government is a part of this, and this particular program isn't just organized by NESG. It is organized under the patronage of the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. So there is that synergy there. If it is the synergy we're talking about, there is the synergy there. But the question now is there the will to actually push through? That is where the question really lies. And then coming back to, fiscal reforms, it's important that these things are happening, but We need to see change. The everyday Nigerian needs to be able to eat. The everyday Nigerian needs to be able to afford things that he could afford before, and that is what the government really needs to pay attention to. We understand we don't have a problem with you going on with these reforms. These reforms, I mean, everybody has said it is good, they're important, but you need to cushion the effect of these reforms. How are you doing that? Wale Edun, that question was thrown to him, and he said, okay, we have NEL fund, we have, consumer credit, which is being given to workers. We also have, smallholder farmers that we're giving fertilizers to. And then there are also some other things, whether it is the economic stabilization bills, and that, of course, on the 1st of October, the president during his speech said that would be transmitted to the National Assembly. We cannot wait for that bill to be transmitted to the National Assembly, because when you disaggregate that bill, you see what is in there. You're going to see that a lot of recommendations there are geared towards reducing food inflation. A lot of recommendations in that particular bill are also geared towards, ensuring that there is fiscal responsibility on the part of the government.
Right. Perpetua, I hate to cut you, but I would like to ask about, we were talking about implementation and, what is important when it comes to the soaring cost of living crisis that we have now in Nigeria. But at the Economic Summit, right, what were some reforms that you think, because I know that you've been having a lot of conversations. You're the host of one of the hosts of the Business Edge. You're a business correspondent. You've had the privilege and opportunity to speak with tons of economists, as well as people who are economist analysts and who know the numbers and understand the statistics. What was one reform or some of the reforms that was not at the front burner that you think should be on the front burner of our discussions?
Well, I think everything was laid bare at that event, because we had a variety of, whether they are economists from different parts of the world, and also had business owners from different parts of the world. Now, the thing is, I feel that, like I was talking about the economic stabilization bill, the recommendations in that bill, coupled with the new withholding tax regime 2024, which of course will be implemented from January 2025, and also the VAT modification. Now, if these things are implemented, I think we're going to a very good place.
Can you give us details on those exactly?
So it's
withholding tax
cleaner
and also
energy.
All right, so talking about the withholding tax, one of the things it actually does is that it makes sure that, some of the deductions that are being done, maybe let's say you are a producer or let's say, you're a producer, you need to, you want to get some supplies from suppliers. Your suppliers are going to deduct some amount from the money you're paying to them. So apart from, let's say, the goods, maybe the goods are worth 3 million naira, maybe at the end of the day, your withholding tax could be maybe about 100 is little. I mean, we're talking big numbers here. So at the end of the day, that money is gone. You don't get it back. But with what we're having, it means that some of those deductions will no longer be made on your money. And I recall that even one of the speakers, one of the business owners that I listened to, was talking about how that with this new withholding tax, it means that a particular supplier that deducts about 100 million naira from their money will no longer be able to deduct that kind of amount because of, the new modification. And apart from that, there was also no clarity as to so many things around the withholding tax. And so this new regime seeks to make some of those things, but even though they're not totally plain yet, because I remember speaking to Oyeyimika, that's the MD CEO of Cadbury, and she was saying that, there is some level of clarity, but even that clarity, we still need more clarification on it. So talking about that, I think businesses, manufacturers are excited about the withholding tax.
So that's for businesses now. Regarding VAT, value-added tax, now for individuals like us, what reforms are they making, and how would that manifest?
We're talking about the VAT. We're having zero-rated VAT, and we're also having, some. Now, when you talk about zero-rated VAT, it means that there is no deduction whatsoever at all. No deduction at all. So that's actually good for you. It means that when you're buying something, the things will actually be cheaper, because the people who are selling do no longer have the responsibility of making some deductions to pay to government. So what we're saying is that if these things are followed through, prices of goods and services will actually be cheaper, because those taxes would have been removed. And you also have to know that for the VAT actually focuses on essentials, whether it's food, health, and education.
But how will the government now make money if we're not paying? The
government is going to make money because we're looking at, okay, you know what, some things are luxury. So for these things that are luxury, we're going to put 2.5% extra, and that's going to be 10%.
So we're taxing the rich now.
That's what it is.
I mean, IMF has also been on our bombs for a very long time about our contribution of tax into our GDP, and it's always been very low, and they're trying to get it up as possible. But away from tax, let's talk about one thing that was very important and was also on the sidelines of discussions during this summit, and it was Nigerians' competitiveness, especially in regional trade. How does this play? What was the conversations regarding that, especially when it comes to ease of doing business and policies that pertains trade in this region?
Well, talking about ease of doing business, that's really a big deal. That's a big issue on the front burner, especially for even business owners. Even the big businesses that were in the room were also complaining about how that so many things, starting from the port, the issues that we're having from the port, a lot of issues really, whether it is bureaucracy and so many things that they actually highlighted. These things do not make anything work. We have a lot of, bureaucracy that we actually need to address. There are so many things, bottlenecks actually, that must be addressed. And then some policy somersault. I mean, today you come up with this policy, you say this, and then people work towards it. And before you know it, you come up with another policy. These things are affecting, business owners. And then talking about after, some other countries are beginning to take advantage of it. But for Nigeria, we keep talking about taking advantage of it, but there is no real or commensurate movement towards actually making things work. Businesses are really complaining. There are so many bottlenecks, whether you want to talk about customs or even the port itself. We need to deal with those places. And then, when you look at the cost of finance in Nigeria, the cost of production, the cost of doing business, all of those things are discouraging. I'll tell you a story. The Cadbury MD talked about, before all of this started, there was this line of product that they started. She didn't say the line of product, but of course,
I watched it, and then she said, they came out. So now they're not even meeting the margins, they're just doing products and so profits.
And invested in, making sure that, they just latched on it. But when these policies came up, they couldn't go ahead anymore. So you've bought
it's
equipment,
just paused, and they had to hold
equipment, you've paid monies and all of that, but then you can't even go ahead anymore because the margin is nothing to write home about. So while we are saying that they are increasing prices, because she actually said in 2 years they've increased prices much more than they ever did in 15 years. But at the end of the day, the increase in that price is actually just...
It's not translating to profit.
It's not translating to profit. The margins are dwindling.
Yeah, Petra, we're pressed for time. But what I took away from this response is staying the course and the lack of continuity when it comes to governance. There's no continuity with our own governance. And the World Bank said that we have to stay the course to reap off the benefits.
Now, talking about staying
Petra, wait fast.
Okay.
Because we have a minute to wrap up, right? So, stay in the course, 10 to 15 years. The World Bank has said that if we stay the course 10 to 15 years, we're going to reap the benefits. What is your thought on that?
Now, you're going to stay the course, that's okay. But you need to cushion the effect of that course on the individuals, on businesses. And that's why it's important that whether it's the Economic Stabilization Bill, the VAT, the withholding tax, or the social protection, or the grant you're giving to businesses, or the single digit loan you're giving to businesses, you need to stay the course on all of those too.
Can they
if you do not stay the course on all of those, you're going to drive Nigerians.
Can they stay the course? Can we stay the course?
We should stay the course. If we do not stay the course, Nigerians would not make it easy for the government. Nigerians, you saw that. That was actually no October 1 protest. That was not a protest. Even the August protest was not a protest. Because if you continue like this,
more like a demonstration. I would say it was.
People will probably fall on the streets, and when people start falling, then you would know that there is a bigger problem.
Perpetua.
They need to stay.
It's getting Perpetua to stop talking.
Look at someone who didn't have energy when she came in.
It's getting her to stop talking about business. That's the problem. She never stops. Please don't get her angry.
No, of course not. Now, come on.
Thank you very much, Perpetua, for coming through for a weekend. We appreciate this. And we still have plenty to talk about on this subject. So maybe on another time. We'll take it back in.